I have lived my whole life carefully, quietly, the kind of woman who pinches every penny until it squeaks. While other women bought new dresses for every holiday, I wore the same faded blouse, mended so many times the fabric itself seemed to sigh. When neighbors gossiped about trips to the seaside, I stayed home, stirring thin porridge, humming to myself while the walls of our small house listened. It wasn't that I begrudged them their joys. It was that I had a different kind of hope. Every coin I saved, I slipped away into a little book with a red cover, my secret savings account, my hidden strength. That book became more than money. It was my quiet prayer for dignity. It lay tucked away in a locked drawer beneath old photographs and yellowing letters. I told no one, not even my husband. Especially not him. He had always been a man who spent freely when he had it and brooded when he didn't. I learned long ago that if I wanted security, I had to carve it out with my own tired hands. For decades, I rose before dawn, selling vegetables at the market, scrubbing clothes for richer families, sewing until my eyes burned. Every crumpled bill, every coin heavy in my palm, I imagined sliding into that book. It was my safeguard against sickness, my whisper of freedom in a house where my voice had grown small. I never thought of it as greed. To me, it was love for my son, for the child he would someday bring into my arms. I wanted to be able to buy medicine if he fell ill, to pay for school books, to leave behind something that said, "Your grandmother's hands worked for you, even before you asked." But life is not so kind. My son married, and with marriage came change. My daughter-in-law entered our home with the perfume of modern ambition clinging to her skin. She was sharp, polished, the kind of woman who looked at my patched apron with a wrinkle of distaste. At first, I tried to please her cooking her favorite dishes, stepping lightly around her moods. I told myself, if she loves my son, then I will learn to love her too. Yet shadows grew in the corners of our house. I noticed the way she whispered with my husband when she thought I wasn't watching, the way their eyes flicked toward me like I was the outsider. I caught fragments of words, money, house, savings, and though I kept my silence, my heart pounded with unease. Still, I clung to my secret. That book with the red cover was safe, wasn't it? One evening, my little granddaughter, barely 7 years old, with eyes bright as dawn, climbed into my lap. She pressed her cheek against my wrinkled chest and asked, "Grandma, why do you always count papers at night when you think I'm asleep?" I froze. Children see more than we think. I kissed her hair, whispering, "Those papers are just dreams, my dear. Dreams for you." She giggled, not understanding, but in that moment I felt both exposed and strangely proud. Perhaps my secret was not only a burden, it was also a promise. I thought I had time to decide when to reveal my savings, time to shape it into a gift, a legacy. I never imagined that those I trusted most would reach into the drawer where my heart lay folded between old bills. But even as I tell you this, I feel the chill in my bones. The story is not gentle. It is about how the people closest to me, the ones who should have guarded my dignity, chose instead to strip it away. And though the night is long and the shadows stretch across my floor, I must begin here with the red-covered book, with the years of quiet sacrifice, because without it, you cannot understand the wound that was to come. The mornings in our house always began with the clatter of dishes and the smell of rice steaming. I liked to rise first, before the sun's rays pierced through the thin curtains, before the rest of the house filled with noise. The silence of dawn was my only true companion. I would boil the kettle slowly, listening to the faint whistle, and in that quiet I reminded myself why I endured. Every wrinkle on my hands carried a memory of sacrifice. Every callus was a page in the story of survival. But peace never lasted long. As soon as my daughter-in-law woke, the air shifted. Her heels clicked sharply across the tiles, her voice cut through the morning like a blade. She never shouted at first. Her disapproval was quieter, more poisonous. "Mother," she would say, her lips tightening, "you use too much water when washing vegetables. Do you know how much the bills are?" Or she would peer into the pot, wrinkle her nose and sigh, "This again? Don't you ever think to try something new?" I swallowed her words like bitter medicine, forcing myself to believe patience would heal everything. My son, caught between us, would often nod absently, too tired from work to take sides. He had grown thin and distracted, always on his phone, always rushing. I feared he no longer saw me as the woman who once held him through fevers, who walked miles to buy his medicine. To him, I was just another body in the house, useful but invisible. The true seeds of tragedy, however, were sown in whispers. At night, when I retreated to my small room, I could hear muffled voices from the living room. My husband and my daughter-in-law speaking low but urgent. Sometimes I caught fragments. Bank. Her savings. Why keep it hidden? My husband's tone carried a coldness I had never known in our younger years. Once, long ago, he was my companion in hardship, the man who shared half a sweet potato with me during lean harvests. Now, he was a stranger siding with another woman, a younger woman, against me. I told myself I was imagining it. Surely after a lifetime together, he would not betray me. Surely my daughter-in-law was exaggerating, twisting his ear with modern ideas. But the unease gnawed at me until even the silence of dawn felt heavy. There were small incidents that deepened my dread. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I returned to my room and found my drawer slightly open. The lock I always turned with trembling fingers was tilted. My heart pounded as I pulled it open, searching for the red-covered book. It was still there, resting under my photographs, but it looked disturbed, like someone had lifted it, flipped through its pages, and placed it back carelessly. I touched it, whispering, "Still mine, still safe." But my palms sweated as if my body already knew what my mind refused to accept. I grew more protective, more secretive. When my granddaughter played near my room, I shooed her away gently, afraid her innocent curiosity would lead others to the book. She would pout, clutching her doll, and I would ache inside, wishing I could explain. But how could a child understand that survival sometimes depended on silence? Still, her presence was the one light in my dimming world. She would curl against me in the evenings, whispering stories she invented about princesses and kind grandmothers who carried treasures in hidden chests. Sometimes I wondered if she sensed more than she should, if her fairy tales were echoes of the truth she had glimpsed. Meanwhile, the household tension grew sharper. My daughter-in-law began speaking more openly about money. At dinner she would say, "Father, we need to renovate the house. We can't keep living like this forever." And my husband would nod gravely, his chopsticks tapping rhythmically against his bowl. I sat there silently, chewing rice that tasted like ashes. They never looked at me, as if I were already excluded from their plans. One evening, the conversation turned crueler. I heard her voice, sweet and cutting. "Why should she keep it? Isn't it for the family? She doesn't need much at her age." My husband grunted in agreement, a sound that cracked something inside me. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the words sank into me like thorns. The book with the red cover was no longer just savings, it was my last thread of control, my proof that I mattered. Without it, I would be nothing but a shadow in a house that once called me mother. The days dragged on, each one heavy with dread. I counted the hours not by the clock, but by the small rituals of defense, checking the lock, touching the book, praying silently. Yet deep inside, I felt the soil shifting under my feet, the roots of betrayal growing stronger. I wanted to believe that love could still protect me, that blood ties could still mean something, but the truth was already moving against me, unseen but unstoppable. The seeds had been planted, and soon they would bloom into a betrayal I could not undo. It is strange how the smallest daily quarrels can cut deeper than any blade. They may not bleed the skin, but they bleed the spirit. My daughter-in-law had a way of turning even the simplest task into a battlefield. "Mother," she said one morning, her arms folded across her chest as I stirred the soup, "why do you use so much salt? Do you not care about anyone's health?" Her tone was sharp, not seeking advice, only judgment. I stared at the pot, the steam rising like a curtain between us, and murmured, "I have cooked this way for decades. Your husband grew up on this food." She laughed, a sound without warmth. "And look how thin he is now. Maybe your old methods are not so good after all." My son sat at the table, silent, scrolling through his phone. His lips tightened, but he said nothing. The silence hurt more than any accusation. If he had spoken up for me, even once, I might have borne the insult more easily, but his quietness was agreement in disguise. Meals became trials. If the rice was too soft, she frowned. If the meat was too tough, she sighed loudly, stabbing it with her chopsticks. I tried to swallow my pride, telling myself, "Patience, patience. This is your son's wife. the mother of your granddaughter. For peace, you must endure. But each word chipped away at the wall inside me until I wondered if one day it would crumble altogether. Money was her favorite subject. She spoke of it as if it were air always present, always necessary, always not enough. At breakfast, she would ask my husband about bills, about new purchases. At night, she spoke of saving for vacations, for clothes, for furniture. I wanted to laugh sometimes, bitterly, because all my life I had measured wealth not in luxuries but in survival. She had no idea what it meant to stretch a single coin across 3 days. One afternoon she came into my room unannounced, her heels clicking across the wooden floor. She looked around with the sharp eyes of a hawk, scanning my few belongings. "It's so cluttered in here," she remarked. "Old things everywhere. Don't you ever throw anything away?" I forced a smile. "Old things have memories. They remind me of who I am." She tilted her head, her eyes lingering on the drawer where my savings lay. For a heartbeat, the world froze. My throat went dry. My hands trembled at my sides. She smiled thinly, then turned away. "Some memories should be discarded. They only hold people back." That night I could not sleep. I touched the lock of the drawer over and over, whispering prayers into the darkness. I began to wonder if I had been foolish to hide my secret in such an obvious place. But where else could I put it? The book had become part of me, like a vein beneath my skin. To move it felt like tearing away my own flesh. The next day, as if fate wished to remind me of both love and cruelty, my granddaughter bounded into the kitchen. She tugged at my apron and said, "Grandma, come play with me. Mama says you are always too busy." Her small fingers clutched mine, soft and trusting. In her eyes I saw the only reflection of myself that still carried respect. We sat together on the porch, and she told me stories of a kingdom where grandmothers ruled, where no one could take away their treasures. I laughed through tears, holding her close. She didn't understand why my voice shook, but even her innocence could not shield me from the tightening rope inside this household. Later that evening, I overheard my husband speaking harshly. "She has no right to keep secrets. What's hers is ours." My daughter-in-law's voice purred in response. "Then we must act before it's too late." My chest constricted. I wanted to burst from my room, to scream, to claw the truth from their throats. But instead, I sat in silence, pressing my palms to my knees until they hurt. That is what life had made of me, a woman who swallowed storms and pretended they were raindrops. The days that followed grew colder. Though the sun still shone, every word from my daughter-in-law dripped with disdain. Every glance from my husband carried suspicion. Even my son avoided my eyes, as if he knew something he was too weak to confess. I told myself again and again, "The book is safe. They cannot take it from me." But already, deep in my bones, I felt the truth pressing in. Safety was an illusion, and illusions never last. Dinner has always been the heartbeat of a household. When I was young, I believed that families who shared meals together could weather any storm. But now, each dinner felt like walking barefoot across shards of glass. That evening, I laid the table carefully, smoothing the cloth as though neatness could somehow mend the fractures between us. I cooked a simple stew, fragrant with ginger and scallions, the kind of meal my son used to devour as a boy. I hoped, foolishly, that the taste of childhood might soften his silence. My daughter-in-law arrived late, her perfume sweeping in before her, her phone pressed against her ear. She dropped into her chair with a sigh, barely glancing at me. "Is this all?" she asked flatly when I set the pot in the center. "It is nourishing," I murmured, ladling the broth into bowls. "Good for the body after a long day." She tapped her nails against the table, her eyes narrowing. "Always the same, always cheap. Do you think my husband works so hard just to eat like a peasant?" My son shifted uncomfortably, his chopsticks frozen halfway to his mouth. He did not defend me. He never did. My husband cleared his throat, his gaze flicking to me like a silent rebuke. "She has a point," he muttered. "We can afford better now. Why do you insist on living as if we are still poor?" I felt my cheeks burn. I wanted to shout that poverty had carved itself into my very bones, that I had no other way of being. Instead, I swallowed the words with my food, each mouthful bitter. Halfway through the meal, my daughter-in-law's voice sharpened. "Speaking of money," she said casually, though her eyes gleamed like knives, "we should start saving for renovations. A bigger kitchen, a proper guest room. Father agrees it is necessary. I set down my spoon carefully, though my hand trembled. Renovations are costly. Perhaps we should think of other priorities. She smirked. Priorities? Like what, Mother? Hoarding away scraps in old drawers? The words struck me like a slap. My chest tightened, my breath caught. I looked at my husband, begging silently for him to stop her. But he only lowered his gaze to his bowl, as if the rice grains held more worth than my dignity. My granddaughter, sitting beside me, looked up with wide eyes. Mama, Grandma makes the best food. I like it more than restaurants. Her small voice was soft but firm, like a bird defending its nest. For a moment, the air shifted. My heart swelled with gratitude, but my daughter-in-law laughed, brushing the child's words aside. You are still a child. What do you know? When you grow up, you will crave better things too. I squeezed my granddaughter's hand under the table, whispering, Never forget that love tastes better than any feast. She smiled at me, though her eyes shimmered with confusion. The rest of the meal passed in silence, heavy and suffocating. Plates clinked, chopsticks scraped, but no warmth lingered. I felt like a ghost haunting a table that no longer belonged to me. Later that night, as I cleared the dishes alone, I overheard them again, my husband and daughter-in-law, their voices carrying through the thin walls. She is hiding something, she insisted. Yes, he replied coldly. I have suspected it for years. It is time we confronted her. The plate in my hand slipped and shattered against the floor. I froze, heart pounding, praying they had not heard. I knelt to gather the pieces, the shards cutting into my fingers, but I barely felt the pain. All I could hear was the echo of their betrayal. When I finally retreated to my room, I sat beside the drawer for hours, my hands trembling against the lock. I wanted to open it, to hold the red-covered book against my chest and remind myself it was still mine. But fear kept me still. If I opened it, I might discover it was already gone. So I sat there in the dark, listening to the sound of my granddaughter's laughter drifting faintly from the next room. That sound was the only thing anchoring me to hope. Yet even hope felt fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm. I knew then that the days of quiet saving, of silent guarding, were ending. The storm was no longer distant, it was pounding on my very door. It happened on a humid afternoon when the air pressed down like a heavy blanket and even the walls seemed to sweat. I had just returned from the market, my basket filled with vegetables and my back aching from the weight. The house was too quiet, no clatter of dishes, no laughter from my granddaughter, only silence, stretched thin and sharp. I felt it at once. Something was wrong. My heart thudded against my ribs as I hurried down the hallway. When I entered my room, the sight stopped me cold. The drawer, the one drawer I trusted more than any human being, stood slightly open. The lock dangled broken, its small metal tongue twisted cruelly out of shape. For a moment I could not breathe. My hands shook as I pulled the drawer wider, rifling through the layers of old photographs, brittle letters, bits of fabric from long-forgotten dresses. At last, my fingers touched the spot where the red-covered book should have lain. Empty. The sound that escaped me was not a scream, not a sob, but something caught between the two, a hollow gasp torn from the bottom of my lungs. I pressed my hands to my mouth, as if silence could undo what had been done. But silence has never mended anything. I stumbled backward, my legs trembling, and sank onto the bed. For years that book had been my secret companion, my shield against despair. Now it was gone, stolen not by strangers but by the very people who shared my roof. The door creaked. My husband appeared, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" he asked flatly, his eyes flicking toward the drawer as if he already knew. My voice cracked. "Where is it?" He did not pretend to misunderstand. "It was never yours alone. You know that." Tears blurred my vision. I saved every coin with these hands. I denied myself so that there would be something when the world turned dark. How can you say it is not mine? His face hardened, cold as stone. You are part of a family. What you earn, what you keep, it belongs to all of us. You should have told me long ago. Behind him, my daughter-in-law's silhouette emerged, her lips curled into a smile that cut deeper than any knife. "We only took what was rightfully ours," she said softly, mockingly. "You shouldn't hide things, Mother. Secrets only poison families." Her words slithered through the room, leaving a taste of iron on my tongue. I wanted to rise, to strike her, to demand she return what she had stolen. But my body betrayed me, trembling too violently to stand. "You had no right," I whispered. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "No right to family money? You call it your sacrifice, but who did you sacrifice for, if not for your son, your granddaughter, your husband? You hoarded it as if you could buy love with numbers on a page." I shook my head, my tears falling hot against my cheeks. It was not hoarding, it was hope. It was the only way I knew to protect what mattered. My husband's voice cut across mine, sharp and final. "Enough. The money will be used wisely. You are too old to carry such burdens. Let it go." The finality in his tone sliced through me. He had not stood by my side. He had chosen her, our son's wife, over me, his partner of decades. In that instant, I felt not only robbed but erased. My granddaughter appeared then, clutching her doll, her eyes wide as saucers. She had heard everything. She ran to me, burying her face in my lap. "Grandma, don't cry," she whispered, her small hands patting mine. "You still have me." Her innocence pierced my despair, a tiny flame against the dark. I held her tightly, rocking her as though I could shield her from the ugliness of the world. Over her head, I saw my daughter-in-law's smirk, my husband's cold indifference, and I knew the battle had only just begun. That night, after the house sank into uneasy silence, I sat alone in my room staring at the broken lock. My hands traced the jagged metal edges, my mind replaying every sacrifice, every night of hunger, every hour of labor that had built that stolen sum. They had not just taken my money. They had taken the meaning of my suffering. But as I kissed my sleeping granddaughter's forehead later, I realized something. Not everything was lost. They could steal the book, the numbers, the paper. But they could not steal what still burned in my heart, the promise I had made to her, the love I carried. I whispered into the dark, my voice steady though my tears did not stop. "You may have claimed the money, but I will keep the part you can never touch." The days after the theft stretched long and heavy, like winter skies that never clear. My body moved through the motions of life, cooking, cleaning, tending to my granddaughter, but my spirit staggered as though I had been struck down. The broken lock on my drawer glared at me every time I passed, a cruel reminder that nothing was safe, not even the sacrifices of a lifetime. My daughter-in-law began walking taller in the house, her voice ringing with a confidence that stung. She spoke of plans as if she had won some grand victory. "With the money we can finally begin renovations," she told my husband, her words sharp enough for me to hear from the kitchen. A modern kitchen, a larger dining room, no more living in the past. I clenched the ladle in my hand until my knuckles whitened. Living in the past, was that what she called the roof that sheltered her, the food I cooked, the hours of labor that built this house brick by brick? She dismissed it all as outdated, as if my existence itself were an inconvenience. One evening, the family gathered around the table. My husband cleared his throat, his eyes avoiding mine. "We should all be grateful," he announced. "The money will not go to waste. It will strengthen our home, our future." My chest burned. "Our future?" I said softly, but the tremor in my voice gave me away. "That money was not yours to take. It was mine from years of sacrifice." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. My son looked up from his bowl, his eyes flickering uneasily between us. For a moment, I thought he might defend me. But then his shoulders sagged, and he returned to his rice. My daughter-in-law broke the silence with a laugh that carried no joy. "Sacrifice? Don't flatter yourself, Mother. Did you not live under this roof all these years? Did we not feed you, clothe you, give you warmth? What you saved was for all of us. You were only keeping it until we needed it." Her words slammed against me like waves against a cliff. I looked at my husband, desperate, but he nodded slightly as if her logic made sense. My heart cracked at that small gesture. "You robbed me," I whispered, my throat raw. "You broke the only trust I had left." Her eyes glittered, triumphant. "Trust? Families don't keep secrets. If you truly trusted us, you would have shared long ago." Shame and fury tangled in me until I could no longer sit. I rose from the table, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. My granddaughter's spoon clattered as she reached for me, her little face pale with fear. "Grandma, don't go," she pleaded. I touched her hair gently, forcing a smile. "Eat, child. You need your strength." My voice cracked, but I would not let her see my breaking heart. I retreated to my room, slamming the door behind me, though the thin wood muffled nothing. I heard my daughter-in-law's voice rising, speaking to my husband, her tone laced with mockery. "She is too dramatic. She should be grateful she no longer has to worry. At her age, what use is money anyway?" Those words burrowed deep into me, festering. Was that what they believed, that I no longer had a right to plan, to dream, to protect myself? That age stripped me not only of strength but of dignity? That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my granddaughter's soft breathing beside me. She had crept into my bed, clutching her doll, unwilling to leave me alone. In her sleep she whispered, "Grandma, don't be sad." My tears fell silently into her hair. It was then I understood something sharp and clear. They did not just want the money, they wanted to silence me, to erase my voice from decisions, to reduce me to nothing but a shadow in their home. The money was merely the weapon they had used. But I am not made only of shadows. I am the sum of every hardship I endured, every coin I pressed into that red book, every night I stayed hungry so my son could eat. They could take the paper, the numbers, but they could not take the truth of what I had done. I vowed silently that night, as my granddaughter's hand curled around mine, that I would not let them steal everything. They might strip me of wealth, but they would not strip me of worth. Somewhere, somehow, I would keep a part of myself safe, a part they could never touch. If betrayal inside the home is a wound, then betrayal revealed outside is salt poured straight into it. I had thought, perhaps foolishly, that the theft of my savings would remain a secret shame between the walls of our house. But shame, once kindled, spreads like wildfire. My daughter-in-law was the one who struck the match. It began on a Sunday afternoon when relatives came to visit. My husband's younger brother and his wife arrived with a bag of fruit, their voices loud and cheerful. I forced myself to smile, to set out tea, to act the part of the gracious hostess. My granddaughter skipped happily between us, laughing as she peeled longan fruit with sticky fingers. For a moment, I almost felt normal again. Then my daughter-in-law's voice cut through the chatter. She leaned across the table, her smile sweet, but her words barbed. "We're finally starting renovations soon," she announced brightly. Thanks to the money Mother had been hiding all these years. The teacup slipped from my hands and clattered against the saucer. My breath caught. I looked at her in horror, silently pleading, "Don't." But she continued, her eyes glittering with satisfaction. Can you believe it? All this time she was keeping a secret savings account. Not a word to Father, not even to her son. We only discovered it recently. Imagine that, keeping such things from family. The room fell silent. My brother-in-law raised his eyebrows. His wife coughed awkwardly into her hand. My husband sat rigid, neither defending me nor stopping her. My son lowered his gaze, cheeks flushed, as though I were the one who had sinned. Heat rose to my face, tears stung at the corners of my eyes. I wanted to shout, to explain, to lay bare the years of sacrifice, the endless labor, the nights of hunger, all for that money, but my throat locked tight, as if a hand had closed around it. My daughter-in-law pressed on, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Of course she meant well, I suppose, but secrets only cause pain. Now that it's out in the open, we can finally use the money wisely for the family, for the future. Don't you agree? Her gaze lingered on me like a knife twisted slowly. Laughter bubbled uneasily around the table. My brother-in-law muttered something about practicality. His wife nodded, murmuring, "Yes, better to use it than hide it." Their words were not cruel, but they cut just the same. They were siding with her, not with me. My granddaughter clutched my arm, frowning. "Grandma didn't do anything wrong," she declared, her small voice breaking the tension. Everyone turned to look at her, and she shrank back but did not let go of me. I stroked her hair, my hands trembling. "It's all right, child," I whispered, though it was not. Inside, I burned. Not only had they stolen my savings, they had stolen my dignity, dragging it into the light for others to see, to judge, to dismiss. I sat there, silent, while the room moved on, while the conversation shifted to lighter topics, as if nothing had happened, but nothing could erase the humiliation that had already seared itself into my skin. That night, after the relatives left, I confronted my daughter-in-law. My voice shook, but it carried years of suppressed fury. Why did you humiliate me like that? Was it not enough to steal from me? You had to shame me too? She looked at me coolly, her arms crossed. You embarrassed yourself, Mother. Secrets always come out. I simply told the truth. Why should we hide it? My husband, standing nearby, nodded slowly. Better this way, no more lies, no more pretending. I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. Pretending. Was it pretending to work until my fingers bled? Pretending to skip meals so our son could eat? Pretending to save so we would never have to beg from others? If that is pretending, then what is your loyalty worth? He turned away, unwilling to meet my eyes. My daughter-in-law's smile widened, cruel and calm. You see, Mother, this is why secrets are dangerous. They make you bitter. Let it go. Accept that what is yours is ours. You'll live more peacefully that way. Peacefully. The word rang hollow in my ears. They were not offering me peace. They were demanding my silence. That night, as I lay awake, I felt my granddaughter stir beside me. She had crept into my room again, her small body warm against my side. Don't be sad, Grandma, she whispered in her sleep. Her little hand clutched mine tightly, as if anchoring me to this world. I kissed her forehead, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. I will not let them take everything, I vowed into the darkness, not while I still have you. The humiliation was bitter, but it also sharpened something inside me. If they wished to strip me of dignity, then I would find another way to keep it, a secret they could never touch. Humiliation spreads like ink spilled across paper, dark, irreversible, seeping into places you never meant it to reach. After that Sunday, I thought the worst had already happened. But my daughter-in-law had tasted victory, and she wanted more. A week later, there was a neighborhood gathering at the community hall. It was meant to celebrate the mid-season festival lanterns strung high, tables laden with food, children running barefoot across the courtyard. I had planned to stay home, but my granddaughter begged me. Please come, Grandma. I want you to see me light my lantern. How could I refuse her? So I went, my hair tied neatly, my best blouse pressed though the fabric was thin with age. I carried pride like a fragile vase in my hands, hoping no one would touch it too hard. At first things were pleasant enough. Neighbors greeted me warmly, though I noticed some eyes lingered longer than before, whispers trailing behind me like smoke. Still, I smiled, handed out sweets to the children, and watched my granddaughter's laughter flicker in the glow of lantern light. Then I heard her voice, my daughter-in-law standing among a group of women, speaking with exaggerated sorrow. It's been so hard managing the household finances, she said, loud enough for others to hear. Imagine our shock when we discovered Mother had been hiding money for years. We could have used it to support the family, but instead she kept it secret. The women gasped, nodding knowingly, their eyes darting toward me. One whispered, "How selfish." Another, "At her age, what does she need savings for?" Their judgment fell on me like stones. My face burned. I wanted to melt into the ground, to disappear. I clutched my granddaughter's hand, trying to guide her away, but she tugged back. "Why are they saying bad things about you, Grandma?" she asked, her innocent voice cutting straight through my chest. Before I could answer, one of the neighbors approached me directly. "Is it true?" she asked bluntly. "Did you keep money hidden from your own family?" The courtyard grew quiet. All eyes turned to me, waiting. My throat closed, my voice trapped beneath the weight of shame. I wanted to scream the truth that it was not selfishness, but sacrifice, not greed, but survival. But in that moment, surrounded by their stares, I felt smaller than I had ever felt before. "Yes," my daughter-in-law answered for me, her smile sharp. "But don't worry, we've taken care of it. The money is safe now where it belongs with the family." Laughter rippled among them, nervous but complicit. No one spoke for me. No one asked about the years I had spent bending my back to earn each coin. No one cared. I pulled my granddaughter close, whispering, "Stay strong, little one." She buried her face against me, her small shoulders trembling. When we returned home, I could no longer hold back. I confronted my husband in the living room, my voice raw. "Do you know what she has done? She has dragged my name through the mud, humiliated me before the entire neighborhood." He sighed as though I were a tiresome child. "Better that they know now, than gossip behind our backs. You brought this upon yourself by keeping secrets." My knees weakened. brought this upon myself? For saving? For trying to protect us? Is there no place left for my dignity? My daughter-in-law entered then, her expression calm, almost amused. You are overreacting, Mother. Everyone knows the truth now. You should be relieved it's no longer a burden you carry alone. Her words slithered like poison. Relieved? I spat, my voice trembling. You call it relief to be stripped of respect? To be paraded as a miser in front of neighbors? She shrugged. Respect is not built on secrecy. Accept it and you will find peace. Peace. Again that word. Always peace, always silence. But what they meant was obedience. That night, I sat alone on the porch, the moonlight silvering my tears. My granddaughter crept out, carrying her small lantern, its flame flickering bravely in the night breeze. She placed it in my lap and said, "Grandma, don't let them blow out your light." Her words were simple, but they pierced deeper than any lecture. I held the lantern close, its glow warming my trembling hands. And I realized something. They could humiliate me, strip me of money, of dignity, of respect, but they could not extinguish the light I still carried for her. And that light, though fragile, would be the seed of my defiance. The public shame at the community gathering should have been enough. I prayed it would satisfy her, that my daughter-in-law would let the matter rest once she had secured her victory. But power, once tasted, rarely loosens its grip. She had found a weapon against me, and she wielded it without mercy. It was during a larger family reunion that the wound was torn wider. My husband's relatives filled our house, cousins, nieces, nephews, their voices bouncing off the walls like birds trapped in a cage. I busied myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, boiling tea, arranging plates with trembling hands. Hosting was once my pride, but that day it felt like walking toward the gallows. I could hear her laughter from the living room, bright and commanding. She loved being the center of attention, her words pouring out while the others nodded, eager to stay in her good graces. My husband's low voice hummed in agreement, his loyalty now bound to her instead of me. Then it came. "So, as you all know," my daughter-in-law said, her voice deliberately carrying through the doorway, "we've begun renovations on the house. New walls, new tiles finally, a home worthy of respect. And it's all thanks to the money Mother kept hidden." The room erupted in chatter. Some gasped, others laughed. One of the nephews exclaimed, "Really? Auntie, you had a secret stash all this time?" Another added, "Why didn't you tell the family? We could have helped use it wisely." I froze, my knife hovering above the chopping board. My vision blurred, and for a moment I feared I would collapse. My dignity, once private, was now a feast for them all to devour. I stepped into the living room, my hands still damp from the sink. "Enough," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Do not speak of what you do not understand." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. But my daughter-in-law only smiled sweetly, her eyes glittering with cruelty. "Why not, Mother? Secrets are dangerous, aren't they? Everyone should know how much you kept from us. Isn't family about sharing?" I looked around at the faces, my husband's eyes cold, my son's gaze lowered, the relatives shifting uncomfortably, some smirking, some pitying. Not one of them stood beside me. Not one. A cousin snickered. "All these years we thought you lived so simply because you had nothing. Turns out you were richer than you looked." Their laughter stabbed at me. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet, the air grow heavy in my lungs. My granddaughter clutched my skirt, her eyes brimming with confusion and fear. "Grandma?" she whispered. Shame and rage surged through me. "That money was mine," I said, my voice shaking. "Earned with my own hands, saved from my own sacrifices. Do not call it selfishness, call it survival." But my words fell flat. My husband's voice cut across mine, sharp as a blade. "Survival? What survival when you live under this roof, eat our food, share our name? You are part of this family. What is yours is ours. Stop embarrassing yourself." The finality in his tone broke something in me. I looked at him, the man I once trusted, once leaned upon and saw only a stranger. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. The room blurred, the faces swimming before me. Then I felt a small hand press into mine. My granddaughter, her eyes fierce for a child so young, looked up at me and said clearly, "Grandma is not selfish. Grandma loves us. She works harder than anyone." The room hushed. For a moment, Silence stretched, pierced only by the child's trembling voice. My throat closed. Tears burned in my eyes. But my daughter-in-law laughed softly, brushing the words aside. Children say sweet things. They don't understand reality. The relatives nodded, the moment of defense dismissed like a puff of smoke. I stood there, my dignity shredded, my granddaughter's brave words drowned by the tide of indifference. That night, after they had all left and the house grew still, I sat alone in my room, staring at the broken lock on my drawer. The space where my book once lay was a hollow in my heart. But it was not only the money that was gone, it was the respect, the voice, the place I once held in this family. I whispered into the dark, my hands trembling. They can call me selfish, they can strip me bare before the world, but they will never understand. Never. And as I held my granddaughter's lantern from the festival, still flickering faintly, I promised myself that I would find a way to keep at least one secret safe one they could never twist into shame. After the family gathering, silence became my only refuge. Yet even silence was poisoned, for behind closed doors I began to hear things not meant for my ears. Whispers drifted through the thin walls at night, fragments of conversations between my husband and my daughter-in-law, words that peeled back the truth piece by piece. One evening, as I sat in my room sewing a torn hem, their voices floated down the hallway. I leaned closer to the wall, my needle paused mid-air. "She doesn't need to know everything," my daughter-in-law said, her tone smooth, practiced. "As long as she stays quiet, it will be fine." My husband's reply was low, gravelly. "The account is already in my name. The bank recognized me as head of household. She can't take it back even if she tries." My fingers went numb. The needle slipped, pricking my skin, a bead of blood blooming bright against the fabric. They had not only stolen the book, they had changed the very papers that bore my years of sacrifice. My savings no longer existed under my name. My life's work had been erased with a stroke of a pen. I pressed my hand against my chest, willing my racing heart to calm. My mind swirled with betrayal so deep it felt like drowning. It was not only theft, it was obliteration. Later that week, I confirmed it myself. I went to the bank, clutching my identification with trembling fingers, praying that somehow there had been a mistake. The clerk glanced at me politely, then typed into her computer. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "This account is no longer registered under your name. It was updated recently. You'll need to speak with your husband for details." Her words echoed in my ears like a death knell. I staggered from the bank into the blinding sunlight, my knees weak, the city sounds muffled as if I were underwater. Strangers brushed past me, their laughter harsh, their steps hurried, while I stood rooted in grief. I returned home in silence, carrying not only the confirmation of my loss, but the heavy weight of invisibility. They had stripped me not just of money, but of existence in the eyes of the world. That night I confronted my husband. My voice was calm, too calm, like the stillness before a storm. "You changed the account," I said, without telling me, without asking me. He did not deny it. It was necessary. For the good of the family. I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. The good of the family? Or the good of her? His jaw tightened. "Watch your words." My daughter-in-law entered then, her smile triumphant. "Why are you so upset, Mother? Isn't it better this way? The money will be put to proper use, renovations, investments, things you could never manage." Her arrogance seared me. "That money was mine," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Mine from years of hunger, of labor, of sacrifice. How dare you erase me?" She stepped closer, her perfume stifling, her words sweet and cruel. "Because you are old, Mother. And old people don't hold the future. They only hold the past. We are the future now." The words struck me harder than any slap. My knees gave way and I sank into the chair, my hands clutching the armrests as though the world itself were crumbling beneath me. In that moment, my granddaughter burst into the room. Her eyes wide, she looked from me to them, sensing the storm. "Grandma?" she whispered, rushing to my side. She clung to me fiercely, her little arms wrapping around my waist. I stroked her hair, forcing strength into my voice. "It's all right, my dear." But it wasn't. It never would be. My husband looked away, my daughter-in-law smirked, and I understood the truth. They would not stop. They would take and take until nothing of me remained. But as I kissed my granddaughter's forehead that night, I made a silent vow. They may have stolen the book, the account, even my name on the papers. But there are secrets they do not know things. I have hidden deeper than any bank, truths I have kept even from myself. And one day, when the time is right, I will reveal them. Not for revenge, but for the child who still believes in me, the only light left in this darkened house. Secrets rarely stay buried, no matter how carefully one tries to cover them. The walls of this house are thin, the air thick with whispers. And though they thought me too old, too broken to notice, I began to see the outlines of their schemes more clearly with each passing day. It was my granddaughter who brought me the first piece of truth, though she did not understand it. One afternoon, while playing in the living room, she picked up a crumpled envelope that had fallen behind the sofa. "Grandma, is this yours?" she asked, holding it up proudly. I took it from her tiny hands, my heart skipping a beat when I recognized the bank's logo. The envelope was addressed to my husband. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a printed statement, listing the balance that had once been mine. But now, next to the account holder's name, were the cruel letters of his "not mine." My breath caught, my vision blurred. Before I could hide it, my daughter-in-law appeared in the doorway, her smile sharp. "What are you doing with that, Mother?" I held the paper to my chest. "Why did you do this?" Her eyes glinted, amused by my desperation. "Because it was necessary. Do you really think you can manage such things at your age? You should be thankful. We've secured it for the family, for your granddaughter's future." But I saw the lie in her eyes. This was not about the future. It was about power, control, possession. That night, I overheard them again. My husband's voice was low, weary. "She's becoming suspicious. We must be careful." "She can suspect all she wants," my daughter-in-law replied, her tone icy. "She has no proof. The papers are in your name now. Legally, she is nothing. Legally, she is nothing." The words echoed in my skull until I felt hollow inside. Decades of sacrifice, erased by a signature. All those years of selling vegetables in the rain, sewing by candlelight, eating scraps so that others could eat full meals reduced to nothing more than legally, she is nothing. I wept quietly in the dark that night, careful not to wake my granddaughter curled beside me. Her small hand clutched my sleeve, as if even in sleep she feared I might vanish. I kissed her forehead, whispering, "I will not disappear, my darling, not while you still need me." The next morning, something strange happened. As I was sweeping the porch, an old neighbor stopped by. She leaned closer, her voice hushed. "I heard about what happened," she said, her eyes full of pity. "People are talking. They say your daughter-in-law is clever, that she convinced your husband to move everything into her control. They say you should be careful women like her don't stop at money." Her words chilled me. I thanked her politely, but inside I trembled. If gossip had already reached the neighborhood, what more humiliation waited for me? Still, even in despair, small fragments of strength began to form. That night, while they all slept, I returned to the envelope I had hidden under my mattress. I read the numbers again, the balance of my life's labor, and though my name was erased, I forced myself to remember. Those numbers came from me. They may have claimed them, but the story of how they were earned could never be rewritten. I began keeping small notes in a worn notebook, documenting what I heard, what I saw: the broken lock, the bank statement, the cruel words whispered behind walls. I knew they would laugh if they found it, dismiss it as the ramblings of an old woman, but to me it was a shield, a way to cling to the truth. My granddaughter noticed one evening as I scribbled quietly by lamplight. "What are you writing, Grandma?" she asked, peeking curiously. "Just memories," I told her, smiling softly. "Memories no one can steal." She grinned, satisfied, and nestled against me. Her trust was the only wealth I had left, and it was worth more than any balance on a page. But deep down, I knew the storm was not over. The money was gone, the account changed, my dignity dragged through the mud. And still, I sensed there was more they were hiding, more than even I dared imagine. Because betrayal, once it begins, rarely stops where you expect. I had thought the worst wound was losing the book, the money, the name that tied it to me. But sometimes wounds deepen in silence, in shadows, in the things you cannot see until they cut you from behind. It was late one evening when the truth began to unravel. My granddaughter had been playing near my husband's desk, coloring pictures on scraps of paper. She came to me proudly, holding up a drawing of a house. "Grandma, look, this is our home, but Mama says soon it will look different. She says the upstairs will be just for her and Papa. Where will you stay?" The crayon slipped from my fingers. What did she say? "Upstairs will be theirs and you will stay down here," she explained, her innocent voice carrying the weight of a storm. "She said you don't need much space anymore." My chest tightened. I forced a smile for her sake, but inside I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Space. They were already dividing the house, carving it into pieces, assigning me a corner like an afterthought. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. I crept into the living room, my heart hammering, and opened the drawers of my husband's desk. There, beneath stacks of papers, I found them property documents, contracts, renovation plans. My hands trembled as I read. The house title. It had always been in his name, but beside it, in newly printed ink, was a clause. Inheritance rights extended to son and spouse. My eyes blurred. Not a single word about me. Not a mention of the woman who had scrubbed floors, carried bricks, stretched every coin to keep this house standing. My breath caught when I saw the renovation plans, the upstairs space labeled as master quarters, the downstairs divided into smaller rooms, one marked simply, storage divided by elder. Elder, that was to be me reduced from mother, wife, laborer, provider, to nothing but elder, tucked away like an object gathering dust. I clutched the papers, rage burning in my chest. When had I become invisible? When had I ceased to be part of the family I had given my life for? I shoved the documents back just as footsteps creaked in the hallway. My daughter-in-law appeared, her eyes sharp in the dim light. "What are you doing?" I straightened, my voice shaking but defiant. "Looking at the future you planned for me, a future where I am nothing." She smiled faintly, as if I were a foolish child. "Don't be dramatic, Mother. You'll still have a place here. You'll always be with us." "A place?" My voice cracked. "A place is not the same as respect. You want me silent, hidden away, stripped of everything I earned." Her expression hardened. "Respect is not given to those who hoard secrets. You lost your right when you chose to hide from your own family. Now it is our turn to decide." My knees weakened. For a moment, I feared I would collapse, but then I felt a tug on my sleeve. My granddaughter, awakened by the voices, stood in the doorway clutching her doll. Her eyes were wide, frightened, but she stepped toward me. "Grandma stays with me," she whispered fiercely, her small hand sliding into mine. For once my daughter-in-law faltered. Her smile wavered, though only for a second. She turned away, muttering, "Children don't understand." But I understood. At last I saw the truth of it. The money was never enough. They wanted everything: my house, my space, my dignity, my role as mother. Piece by piece, they meant to strip me until nothing remained but an old body waiting quietly for the end. That night, when my granddaughter fell asleep in my arms, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. They thought I was powerless, but I still had memory. I still had secrets they did not know. I still had the will to protect the only person who loved me without condition. They could write me out of papers, plans, accounts, but they could not erase what I carried inside. And perhaps, when the time came, that would be my final weapon, the truth hidden in the folds of silence, waiting to be revealed. There comes a point when silence becomes unbearable, when the weight of it crushes the lungs until even breathing feels like betrayal. I had borne their scorn, their whispers, their theft. But the night came when all of it erupted into a confrontation that none of us could escape. It was during another family gathering, this time to mark my husband's birthday. Relatives filled the house again, laughter and chatter echoing through the rooms. I busied myself in the kitchen, arranging dishes with trembling hands. My granddaughter followed me like a shadow, sensing my unease. The evening began with toasts, smiles, and the usual empty pleasantries. My husband sat at the head of the table, his expression stern yet self-satisfied. My daughter-in-law flitted about, pouring drinks, making sure every ear heard her voice. And then, as if she had planned it for maximum cruelty, she raised her glass and said, "We should thank Father not only for his years of strength, but for securing the family's future. If it weren't for him taking charge, we would never have discovered the hidden savings." The room stirred, curious glances turning toward me. My heart pounded in my chest. I had prayed she would not do it again, not in front of everyone, but she was relentless. She smiled sweetly, her words sharpened with malice. Imagine, all those years, Mother keeping secrets, hiding money away as if the rest of us didn't matter. Thankfully, Father and I were able to put it to proper use. For the family. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others chuckled. One relative whispered loudly, "Old people get stubborn. Best the young ones manage it." I felt my cheeks burn, my hands clench into fists. My granddaughter pressed against me, whispering, "Don't cry, Grandma." Her little voice broke something inside me. I rose slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. My knees shook, but my voice, though trembling, carried across the room. "Enough. You speak of family, but you know nothing of it. That money was not yours. It was mine. Mine from nights of hunger, days of labor, years of sacrifice you cannot imagine." Gasps echoed. My daughter-in-law's smile faltered, but only for a moment. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "We are not denying your effort, Mother, but isn't family about sharing? What is yours is ours." I stared at her, my voice rising. Family is built on trust, on love, on respect. Not theft, not humiliation. You took my life's work and paraded it as if I were a miser, a selfish old woman, but I saved for all of you. For the child who stands beside me now. For the future you claim as your own. Silence fell heavy. My husband's jaw tightened, his hand slamming the table. "Enough! You disgrace me in front of our family. Stop this foolishness." I turned to him, tears burning my eyes. "Disgrace? You call me disgraceful when you were the one who betrayed me? You, who once shared my hunger, who once promised we would endure together, now you stand beside her to strip me bare?" The room buzzed with tension, relatives shifting uneasily. Some avoided my eyes, others whispered among themselves. And then, the twist came. One of the older cousins, who worked at the bank, spoke up hesitantly. I heard the account was not just transferred, it was drained. A large withdrawal, only days after the name change. The words crashed into me like thunder. I looked at my husband, then at my daughter-in-law. Their silence was louder than any denial. My voice cracked. "You didn't just take my name. You took the money, all of it." The cousin looked down, ashamed. "That's what I heard. I didn't want to say, but..." Gasps swept through the room. My granddaughter clutched me tighter, sensing the storm. My daughter-in-law's face remained calm, but her eyes flickered with irritation. "It was for investments," she said quickly. "For the renovations, for the future. You wouldn't understand." But I did understand. They had not saved it. They had spent it or planned to. My sacrifice, my shield, my hope all swallowed whole. Tears blurred my vision, but my voice was steel. "You have taken my money, my dignity, and now you dare tell me I would not understand? I understand too well. You never wanted family, you wanted control." The room erupted in murmurs. Some looked at me with pity, others at them with suspicion. But for the first time, cracks appeared in her perfect mask. I sat slowly, my granddaughter's arms around me. My body shook, but inside, something steadier than rage formed. They thought they had erased me, but the truth was spilling piece by piece. And truth, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. The cousin's words hung over the room like smoke after a fire, visible, choking, impossible to ignore. "A large withdrawal," he said, and the last thread of doubt snapped. The theft had a date, a sum, a trail that didn't care for feelings. My daughter-in-law didn't flinch. She set her glass down with a click. "This is neither the time nor the place," she said. "Renovations need deposits. Delays cost money." A murmur moved across the relatives, some approving, some uneasy. My husband stared at his plate as if numbers might rise from the porcelain to defend him. Once he had fought with me over grains of rice and stood before collectors. Now he would not meet my eyes. I rose. My legs trembled, but my voice steadied. "You speak of investments as if the word absolves harm," I said. "Do you know how long it takes to save one coin when your hands are cracked and your stomach empty?" A few heads lowered. Others stiffened. My daughter-in-law's smile thinned. "Mother, let's not embarrass Father. Everything was done legally. Your name is not on the account or the title. The family will move forward with or without your blessing. Legally, I repeated. And morally? Do those papers teach you how to be a daughter or only how to claim? A cousin coughed. An aunt murmured, "It is complicated." Complicated the polite bridge over other people's pain. My son finally spoke. "Mom, please, it's done. Let's not fight in front of everyone." I looked at him, the boy I carried through fevers. "It was done to me," I said. "And you watched." He looked away. My granddaughter tugged my sleeve, brave and small. "Grandma didn't do anything wrong," she said, louder than before. The room startled at a child refusing to be decoration. "You took her money. You made her cry." For a moment, a few relatives tilted my way. My daughter-in-law felt it and sharpened her tone. "Enough sentimentality. Real life means bills, repairs, school for this child you claim to love." She bent to my granddaughter, sweetening by habit. "Darling, we're doing all this for you." Confusion tightened the child's brow. Then my daughter-in-law produced another blade, paper. She drew an envelope from her bag and slid it toward me. "Since rumors upset everyone, here are the facts. Contractor advances, an investment note, the budget." She flipped a page. "And here is a caregiving plan. We will convert the rear room into a private space for Mother, quiet and safe. She won't have to worry about money again." A caregiving plan. A gentle phrase for a small enclosure. I did not touch the papers. "You would wall me up like a memory," I said. "Neat. Out of sight. Labeled elder. Dignity is acceptance," she replied. "Not defiance." Across the table, the bank cousin cleared his throat. "If there was a withdrawal, there will be receipts," he said. "Even when it's legal, transparency would help." Her smile cracked. "We are under no obligation to parade our finances," she answered, brittle. I lifted the stack only to feel its weight and set it back. How many such sheets had I pressed dry under iron pots in our early years? Notices, contracts, threats. "You think signatures can total me," I said. "They cannot measure nights I skipped meals so a boy could eat, nor mornings I added one coin to a red book." My husband blinked, and in that blink I glimpsed the ghost of the man who once covered me with his coat in a storm. The ghost faded quickly. My daughter-in-law lifted her chin. "Family," she declared. "We've had enough drama. Let's cut the cake." She swept the papers into her bag, the victor tidying a battlefield. But my granddaughter stepped forward, small as a lantern in wind. "If it's for me," she said, voice trembling but clear, "then give it back to Grandma. I want her to have her money." The room forgot how to breathe. A spoon clattered. My husband closed his eyes. My daughter-in-law crouched, syrup sweet. "Darling, Grandma doesn't need to worry. We'll take care of her." "She took care of us," the child answered. "You should say sorry." Gasps, a stifled laugh, a hush. My daughter-in-law swept her gaze across the relatives, inventorying loyalties. The tide was not entirely hers. Not tonight. She turned to my husband. A brief, hard look passed between them. Then she spoke with ceremonial calm. "We will pause renovations," she announced. "For Father's health. We will review the budget privately." It sounded like retreat. It was only repositioning. The party resumed in fragments. Small talk, clinking plates, a birthday song sung without appetite. Sugar could not sweeten the aftertaste of money and shame. Later, after the guests left and the sink cooled around the unwashed dishes, I stood in the kitchen doorway listening to the old hum of the refrigerator, the tired heartbeat of a home pretending to be well. My husband joined me, head bowed. "I didn't mean," he began and stopped. "You meant to survive," I said. "So did I." He nodded once and retreated down the hall, a corridor of a man once full of doors, now leading elsewhere. I returned to my room. My granddaughter slept across my pillow, palm open as if offering me the small treasure of her trust. I set my fingers into her hand and felt warmth gather like a secret flame. They have the papers. They have the word legal. They have walls and plans and signatures that speak in offices where my voice is a rumor. But tonight I also have something. A fissure in their certainty, a room full of witnesses to a child's clear truth, and a faint remembrance in a husband's eyelids. Tomorrow they will tighten what loosened. I know this. The highest wave rarely recedes without dragging something with it. But the sea has turned. Beneath the floorboards they covet, under the tiles they desire, the tide already moves the other way. Dawn came without light. The sky was the color of dishwater, and the house smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner yesterday's party wiped off the surfaces, but not out of the air. I stood in the doorway of my room and listened. Somewhere a pipe clicked. Somewhere a floorboard answered. The home I had kept alive for decades spoke a language I knew by heart, yet I felt like a stranger waiting for permission to enter. By mid-morning, the men arrived: contractor, apprentice, someone with a clipboard. Their boots thudded through the hallway, measuring the house in strides. My daughter-in-law walked with them, her voice brisk, pointing to walls, corners, ceilings. "Here," she said, "and here. We'll open this. We'll close that." She moved past my door without a glance, as if my room were already a diagram. When she reached the rear, she paused. "This space," she said, tapping the plaster with her knuckle, "is perfect, quiet. We'll convert it quickly. Perfect for storage, for silence, for forgetting." I pressed my palm against the bedpost to steady myself. My granddaughter, sensing the weather in me, slipped her hand into mine. "Are they going to break our house?" she whispered. "No," I said, lying softly. "They are going to change it." When the men left, the list remained: measurements, deadlines, costs that were not numbers so much as verdicts. My husband signed a page and set it on the table to dry. He would not look at me, and yet I felt watched, like an old tree being measured for shade instead of life. After lunch, they began moving my things. Not everything, just enough to show me they could. A stack of quilts, 2 boxes of clothes, my sewing kit, a migration, and small trips to the rear room, as if dignity might be softened by several journeys. I followed silently, my fingers on each object as it passed, the way a mother touches her child's coat before a long trip. "Please leave the photographs," I said at last. My voice sounded thin, stretched over too much distance. "I will carry those myself." My daughter-in-law paused at the drawer where the albums lived. Her nails tapped once against the wood, click, click. "Of course," she said, but her mouth shaped the permission like a favor she would charge later. I sat on the floor and opened the first album. Faces rose like lanterns. My son, gap-toothed with a paper crown. My husband and me, younger, narrower, certain we could outwork fate, friends now buried or fled. A garden that had since become parking. I traced the edge of a photograph and felt my throat close. I had built a life at a pace of 1 coin, 1 stitch, 1 bowl of soup at a time. Now it was being rearranged by people who used the word plan like it belonged solely to them. When the hallway quieted, I folded the albums into a cloth and carried them to the rear room myself. It smelled of paint and winter, a room that waited without expecting. Sunlight fell in a thin ribbon across the concrete. My quilts looked smaller against the bare wall. I set the albums on the windowsill and sat on the rolled rug, my knees complaining. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not like a plate, but like ice loosening on a river. No tears came at first, only a hollow ache, the body preparing to believe what the heart had fought. Then the first tear arrived, and with it, the honesty of grief. I covered my face with both hands and allowed the sound to escape, the low animal cry of someone who has kept her voice tied too long. The door shifted. My husband stood there, uncertain, the hall light turning him into a shadow with a familiar shape. For a moment I saw the boy he had been, the man who once smelled of rain and cut wood. Then the present returned. "I asked them to leave the door wider," he said, as if that were mercy. "It will be easier to move things in." "Things," I repeated. The word broke against my teeth. He took a breath, failed to finish, and let it out. "It's only for a while," he said. "Until the work is done." "The work?" I said. "Is it building a room or erasing a woman?" He closed his eyes briefly, as if against sand. "We're all doing our best," he managed. "It's complicated." "Complicated is the name people give to decisions they don't want to feel," I said. "Go." He went. I sat there until the light thinned to evening. My granddaughter found me and curled against my side without speaking. Her quiet was a bandage I did not deserve but could not live without. After a while, she slept, and I carried her back to my bed, my back reminding me I was no longer built for lifting miracles. When I returned to the rear room, night had pushed against the window. The house was finally still, honest in its tiredness. I knelt by the small table and took out the notebook where I had been recording truth dates, words, the shape of their betrayal while it was still warm enough to name. I turned to a clean page. For a long time my hand hovered without landing. Then I began to write, not a list this time, not a record, a letter. To the one who kept my light when I was afraid of the dark, I wrote. And already my eyes blurred. I did not write the child's name. A letter can travel safer when it looks like a prayer. I told her what I had never said aloud, that money is heavy when you carry it alone, that silence grows teeth, that love sometimes must wear a disguise so it can live to see morning. I wrote of the Red Book and the reason it existed before numbers, which was hope. I wrote of hunger turned into patience, of patience turned into savings, of savings turned by others into plans I would never live in. Then I wrote the one decision I had been circling for days. I would leave what still belonged to me where their hands could not reach, not on a ledger, not on a title, but in a will set down in my own words, witnessed by someone who remembers my name without needing to look at paper. It would not be a fortune. It might be no more than a modest parcel long ignored, a small account they forgot to search, a ring whose value was more story than coin, but it would be mine to give. And I would give it to the person who had guarded me better than any door. Tomorrow, I decided, I would go to the small legal office behind the market, the one with the crooked sign and the clerk who still calls me Auntie. I would ask about a simple will. I would write it plainly, without ornament or plea. If the law could be a weapon, perhaps it could also be a refuge. I would copy the letter and place it with the will. I would seal both inside an envelope and show the clerk where to send it if my hand ever failed to come back for it. I paused, smiling despite the ache. The envelope needed a hiding place until then. Not clever, only faithful. My eye fell on the lantern my granddaughter had brought home from the festival, the paper still smelling faintly of smoke and sugar. I lifted it and felt along the bamboo ribs until I found a hollow narrow as a secret. I slid the letter in for tonight. Tomorrow the envelope would be proper and witnessed. Tonight a lantern would be guardian enough. Footsteps crossed the hall. My daughter-in-law. The steps stopped outside, and the knob turned once. "Locked?" she said, surprised. I stood and opened the door a hand's width. "I am packing," I said. "For the move?" Her smile floated like oil on water. "We'll start early. It will be easier if you rest." "I will," I said, and closed the door gently. When her steps faded, I sat again and finished the letter. I wrote one last line. If they ask what I kept, tell them it was not money. It was the right to choose where love goes when I am gone. The pen ran out. I took that as a sign and laid it beside the notebook, a small soldier relieved. The house made its night sounds, the soft tap of a branch, the breath of the refrigerator, the shush of fabric as the air moved it an inch. I lay down on the rolled rug and closed my eyes. For the first time since the lock broke, sleep came without chasing me. It came because I had made a choice that no one else could sign for me. They could still go forward with their walls and plans and words like caregiving and future. They could still hold paper that weighed more than my voice in rooms I did not enter. But I had found a path under their feet, and it led somewhere they did not know how to follow. When I woke near midnight, I checked the lantern and smiled at the small quiet of it. I kissed my fingers and touched the album spines, the window glass, the door. Then I stepped into the hall and stood for a long moment outside my husband's room. I did not knock. There are goodbyes that belong to another life. I returned to my bed and gathered my granddaughter close. She sighed and turned, her arm flung across my ribs like a bar the world could not lift. "I'm here," she mumbled in her sleep. "Yes," I whispered into her hair. "You are." Outside, a stray dog barked once, the sort of sound no one remembers in the morning. Inside, I watched the darkness loosen by degrees until it was simply night again, not a verdict. At last I allowed myself a thought that did not hurt. Tomorrow I would walk to the market, buy 2 oranges, and sign a paper with my own name. They had taken almost everything I had counted. Tonight I started keeping what cannot be counted. After that night with the lantern, I woke to a different silence. It was not lighter, but sharper, like the air after lightning when you know the storm has struck, but not yet passed. My decision, the letter, the thought of a will did not erase the weight pressing on me, but it steadied my spine. I was no longer drifting. I had drawn a line in secret ink, invisible to them but real to me. The next days, life in the house seemed almost normal on the surface. Meals were served, clothes washed, my granddaughter walked to school with her hand in mine. But beneath, every step felt like walking on broken glass. My daughter-in-law grew quieter, but not out of peace rather. It was the quiet of a cat waiting near a hole. My husband avoided me, his coughs echoing down hallways as if he were rehearsing apologies he would never speak. I continued my chores, moving through the house like a ghost tethered by habit. Yet something had shifted. Where before I felt only crushed, now I felt watchful. I began noticing details I had overlooked. Receipts tucked into drawers, whispered phone calls ending the moment I entered a room, documents folded into my husband's coat pocket. Each clue told me they had not stopped. They were preparing something more, something final. One afternoon I overheard my daughter-in-law speaking on the phone. Her voice was low, but the words carried. Yes, the house will be in his name alone. Once renovations are complete, the upstairs is ours. The downstairs, well, she'll manage. She won't fight. A pause, then a soft laugh. She's too old to fight. Too old. The words stung more than any slap. Old enough to work 30 years, to hold a child through fever, to build a life coin by coin, but too old to fight. I pressed my back against the wall until the wood dug into my bones, swallowing the tears that burned my throat. That evening, when the house grew quiet, I opened my notebook again. I added her words to the list, each sentence dated, each lie etched into paper. Perhaps no one would read it. Perhaps no one would care. But it was mine. My record. Proof that I was not silent even when my mouth had no place to speak. My granddaughter found me there, hunched over the desk. She climbed onto the chair beside me, her doll dangling from her arm. "Grandma," she whispered. "Why do you write so much?" I smiled faintly. "Because stories matter, little one. Even if no one listens now, someday they will." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I'll listen." Her words wrapped around my heart like a balm. In her small body I saw the future, not theirs, the future they tried to chain with titles and contracts, but the future of love remembered, love carried forward. Yet even her warmth could not erase the ache of what had been taken. I felt the loss in the smallest moments, reaching for the drawer and remembering the broken lock, stepping into the kitchen and recalling the laughter of neighbors when she mocked me, lying in bed and sensing the space where my husband once whispered dreams. Every memory was a ghost walking beside me, reminding me that I was both alive and erased. One night, unable to sleep, I stepped onto the porch. The moon was high, washing the courtyard in silver. I heard voices from inside the low hum of my husband, the sharper cadence of hers. They spoke of contractors, deadlines, and money already spent. My name was never mentioned. I stood outside my own house, listening like a beggar to strangers dividing spoils. I thought of walking away, of leaving the house to them, carrying nothing but my notebook and my granddaughter's memory of me. But then I imagined her waking to find me gone, her small hands reaching into emptiness, her trust shattered. No, I would not abandon her. Even if my presence was reduced to a corner, even if my voice was silenced, I would remain her anchor. So I stayed. But staying was not surrender. In the morning, I gathered what little strength I had and went to the small legal office behind the market, just as I had planned. The clerk still called me auntie and offered me tea. My voice shook as I explained, but he listened patiently. When I signed my name on the paper, I felt something I had not felt in months, the weight of choice. Small, perhaps fragile, but mine. I walked home with the will tucked deep in my pocket, the paper warm against my skin. They could strip me of money, of titles, of dignity in front of others, but not this. Not the secret I now carried. That evening, I sat with my granddaughter under the dim light of the lantern. She traced circles on my palm with her finger and whispered, "Grandma, you're smiling." "Yes," I said softly, "because sometimes even a small candle is enough to see the path." She tilted her head, puzzled, but returned to her drawing. On the paper, she sketched our house, not the renovated one with upstairs and downstairs, but the one she knew, with all of us under the same roof. In her drawing, my window glowed brightest. I touched the picture and let the tears fall freely, not of despair this time, but of a fragile hope. They believed they had won, but in truth, something had already slipped from their grasp. For while they built walls to contain me, I had built a quiet promise they could never touch. The days folded one into another, each bearing the same careful routine meals, cleaning, small errands, the laughter of my granddaughter weaving through the house like a thread of gold. On the surface, everything seemed calm again. Renovation plans stalled, neighbors grew quiet, relatives drifted back into their own lives. But beneath that calm was an undercurrent no one else could hear, the low hum of something unfinished. They believed I had accepted my fate. My husband no longer avoided me. Instead, he spoke in clipped phrases, treating me as one might treat furniture useful but voiceless. My daughter-in-law grew sweeter in public, her words polished for neighbors and relatives. She carried herself as if victory were already secured, as if my silence was proof that I had surrendered. But I had not surrendered. In my chest, the will lay folded like a hidden heartbeat. In the drawer of my room, locked once more with a new key they did not know I possessed, I kept my notebook, my record of every theft and every word spoken in shadows. And tucked inside the lantern, still resting by my bed, was the letter, the one written, not for courts or contracts, but for the small hands that had held me through the storm. One evening, as the sky bled orange into purple, I sat with my granddaughter in the courtyard. She had drawn another picture, this one of herself and me beneath a giant tree. In her drawing, the tree's roots spread deep, wrapping protectively around us. She held it up proudly. "See, Grandma? This tree never lets go." I kissed her hair, my throat tightening. "It is a good tree," I whispered, "one that remembers where it came from." She looked at me curiously. "Grandma, do you still have dreams?" The question startled me. Dreams, what a dangerous word. For years I had reduced my life to survival, to coins hidden in a red book, to silence swallowed whole. Yet here she was, asking as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Yes," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I dream of you growing with kindness. I dream of leaving you something that is truly yours, not something others can steal." She smiled, not fully understanding, but her eyes shone with trust. That night, I placed the letter and the will together in a plain envelope. On its surface I wrote no name, no instructions, just one word: for love. I hid it deep within an old quilt, one that no one touched because the fabric was frayed. It would wait there, quietly, until the time came. The next morning, I overheard my daughter-in-law complaining to my husband. "She's quieter now, but I don't trust it. Old women are sly. We must keep watch." I smiled to myself in my room. Let her watch. She would see only what I allowed. She might measure my silence, but she could never measure what I had already set aside. As the weeks passed, whispers in the neighborhood faded. People forgot the drama, as they always do. Yet inside me, nothing was forgotten. I carried every word, every humiliation, every betrayal like stones in a pouch, heavy, yes, but also useful. For one day, when the pouch was opened, those stones would tell the story more truthfully than any polished tale my daughter-in-law could spin. Sometimes when the house grew still, I imagined the future. Perhaps they would find the envelope one day, long after my hands had grown too weak to protect it. Perhaps my granddaughter, grown tall and strong, would read my words and know that her grandmother was not the selfish miser others claimed, but a woman who fought quietly to leave her a gift no one else could claim. Or perhaps the envelope would remain hidden for years, discovered by chance, its contents a whisper from the past. Perhaps it would be dismissed, or perhaps it would ignite questions no one was prepared to answer. I could not know. But that uncertainty was my comfort, for in not knowing there was hope. One night, as I sat again with my granddaughter beneath the lantern's soft glow, she asked, "Grandma, will you always be here?" I held her close, feeling the warmth of her small body against mine. My heart ached, for I could not promise forever, but I could promise something else. "I will always leave something for you," I said softly. "Even if you can't see me, you will know I was here." Her eyes grew wide, as if she sensed the weight behind my words. She nodded solemnly and leaned her head against my shoulder. The lantern flickered, casting shadows against the wall. In its light, I saw both the emptiness of what had been taken and the quiet power of what I still held. They thought I was defeated, but they did not understand. Even stripped of wealth, a woman can leave behind a legacy of choice, of truth, of love. The night deepened. My granddaughter drifted to sleep in my arms, and I sat watching the lantern burn low, its flame fragile but stubborn. And in that moment, I whispered into the darkness not a prayer, not a curse, but a question that would linger long after me. Will they remember me as the woman who lost everything, or as the woman who kept one secret they could never touch? The shadows offered no answer, but perhaps that was the point. Some stories are not meant to close. They are meant to remain open, waiting for others to finish.